What if we told you that the legendary king of rock and soul died carrying a secret so heartbreaking he never dared speak it aloud? Behind the velvet suits, the golden crown, and that larger-than-life voice, Solomon Burke hid more than just fame. He hid pain. Why was one of the most powerful voices in soul music quietly estranged from parts of his own legacy? What really happened inside his now-abandoned home? And how did a man who fathered 21 children, married 4 times, and built a fortune reportedly worth $39 million, leave behind so many unanswered questions? Was there a secret about his identity? About his relationships? Stay with us as we step inside the faded halls of Solomon Burke's abandoned estate and uncover the truth behind his hidden life, his rumored sexuality, his shocking net worth, and the sad final moments of a man the world thought they knew. But first, who was Solomon Burke really? Before the fame, the fortune, and the crown of soul, Solomon Burke was born James Solomon MacDonald on March 21, 1940, though some sources list 1936 or 1939, on the upper floor of his grandmother Eleanor Moore's modest row house in West Philadelphia. His gravestone confirms the year as 1940. Solomon's early life was shaped more by the women around him than the father he never knew. His mother, Josephine Moore, was a nurse, school teacher, concert performer, and pastor, a powerhouse of faith and discipline. But it was his grandmother Eleanor who had the greatest impact. She founded a congregation called Solomon's Temple right in her home, and it was there, in the United House of Prayer for All People, that Solomon was consecrated a bishop at birth. From the moment he came into the world, he was being prepared for something larger than life. At age 9, Solomon's life changed again when his mother married Vincent Burke, a butcher and rabbi who became the boy's stepfather. Solomon's name was officially changed to Solomon Vincent MacDonald Burke, a name that would soon echo through gospel halls and soul stages across the country. Those close to him simply called him Soul. Music and ministry were inseparable for young Solomon. He began preaching at just 7 years old, and by the age of 12, he had already become the pastor of his grandmother's church. Described as a frantic sermonizer with mesmerizing delivery, he earned the nickname Boy Wonder Preacher. He brought his voice to the airwaves, hosting gospel shows on WDAS and WHATAM in Philadelphia, where he blended passionate sermons with stirring gospel music. Weekends were for the road. Solomon would pack up a truck and tent and travel to Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas, spreading the word with a spiritual fervor that could shake the rafters. Even as a child, he cultivated a sense of grandeur. Inspired by Superman, he wore a homemade cape every Sunday, stitched from his childhood blankie by his grandmother. Solomon Burke was the oldest of 7 children, in a lively West Philadelphia household. He had 1 sister, Lorena, and 5 younger brothers, Alec, Laddie, Chuck, Danny, and Jolster. As the eldest, Solomon quickly took on the role of a provider. From an early age, he found ways to help support his family, often through hustle and ingenuity. He once recalled building a small delivery wagon from fish boxes to bring groceries to neighbors. By age 7, he was running his own newspaper stand on the corner of 40th and Lancaster. But perhaps his most inventive venture was the 99-cent car wash he ran with friends outside Al's barbershop at 40th and Wallace. Using the shop's water, with permission from Al, the only one who'd let them, Solomon and his crew could clean a car in just 20 minutes. He paid each boy a nickel per vehicle, already showing early signs of his entrepreneurial spirit. Another short-lived job had him selling hot dogs at Eddie's Meat Market, where he crossed paths with a young Ernest Evans, who would later become known to the world as Chubby Checker. Despite his busy work life, Burke stayed in school and eventually graduated from John Bartram High School. Remarkably, he became a father at just 14 years old. While still in high school, Solomon channeled his passion for music into forming a gospel quartet called the Gospel Cavaliers. With his grandmother's gift of a guitar, he wrote his first song, Christmas Presents, and the group began performing in churches around the city. It was during this time that Burke met Kay Loudmouth Williams, a well-known Philadelphia DJ, thanks to Williams' wife, Viola, who had seen Solomon and his group perform at church. Just before the Cavaliers were set to enter a gospel talent contest, they disbanded, leaving Solomon to compete on his own. The contest, held at Cornerstone Baptist Church, offered a record deal as its grand prize. Solomon went in solo and won, beating out 11 other acts. That victory caught the attention of several record labels, including Apollo, VJ, and Peacock Records. Ultimately, Burke signed with Apollo Records after officially naming Kay Williams as his manager. In a bold move, Williams aged Solomon up by 4 years when introducing him to Apollo executive Bess Berman. The age inflation worked, but it also created lasting confusion in the press about how old he really was. Still, the deal marked the beginning of a legendary career, and Solomon Burke was only 15. A journey through struggles and music. For Solomon Burke, navigating the music industry wasn't easy. As he later explained, it was deeply complicated being the kind of artist he was, singing soul music from the heart, yet refusing to be labeled simply as an R&B singer. He pushed back against the expectations of radio DJs and record executives who wanted to mold him into a commercial product. Burke was determined to stay true to himself, even if it meant going against the grain. When Apollo Records signed him, they hoped to turn him into the next Harry Belafonte, one of the biggest stars of the era. Burke recorded 9 songs during his time at the label, starting with his debut single, Christmas Presents, released fittingly on Christmas Eve in 1955. Other early tracks like I'm in Love, I'm All Alone, and No Man Walks Alone didn't make a huge impact at the time, but they hinted at the power and potential of his voice. His self-titled album, Solomon Burke, was re-released in 1964, once his fame had grown. One standout from his early career was You Can Run, But You Can't Hide, a song he co-wrote with Charles Marenstein. The title was inspired by a famous quote from boxing legend Joe Louis, who even helped promote the record. The song earned Burke a spot on The Steve Allen Show in 1957, a significant milestone for any up-and-coming artist. But behind the scenes, things weren't so promising. Burke's manager at the time wanted control, and made that painfully clear. I made you and I can break you, he once warned Solomon. When Burke refused to conform, the manager retaliated by trying to sabotage his career. Still, Solomon held on to his faith and resilience. God gave me the victory, he would later say, by allowing me to perform anywhere, anytime, for thousands and millions of people of all races, creeds, and colors. Faith and setbacks. After his early career momentum stalled, Solomon Burke found himself in a difficult place. Without steady work, his finances dried up, and so did some of his closest relationships. A painful falling out with his mother left him without a home. For a time, the man once called the boy wonder preacher was adrift. People have called me conceited, big-headed, stubborn, arrogant. It has not been easy, he later reflected. And yet, even in the darkest moments, Burke never lost his belief that he was meant for something greater. From his earliest memories, he felt different, chosen somehow. He often said that God calls people in different ways, and he was sure that his calling had always been clear. It was that faith that kept him going. Whether he was in a pulpit or behind a microphone, Solomon brought the same fire and conviction. He believed his voice had a purpose, to heal, to uplift, to unite. Every song, every sermon was part of something bigger. Then came a moment that would change everything. Marvin Leonard, Babe Chivian, a body and fender repairman who also dabbled in real estate, had been watching Burke. He wanted to manage him, but instead of pitching him in a traditional way, Chivian staged an unforgettable gesture. One day, a gleaming red Lincoln Continental convertible appeared in front of the mortuary where Burke was working at the time. A handwritten note was attached to the windshield. "Mr. Solomon, you can move this car and keep it. All I want you to do is record music." The car became an instant spectacle. Police refused to move it. Neighbors stared. Burke's family became increasingly worried. It was drawing far too much attention. Eventually, Burke phoned Chivian, demanding he come get the car. Chivian didn't back down. "I'll move it," he said, "but only if you promise to record music. No contracts, no lawyers, just a handshake." Burke agreed. That handshake wasn't just a handshake. It was the spark that reignited Solomon Burke's career. Within a few months, he was back in the studio, this time with Atlantic Records. That single bold act, born from trust rather than paperwork, set Burke on a new path, one that would eventually make him one of the most revered and successful soul singers of his generation. Burke often credited his rise not to luck or strategy, but to something higher. "I became the king of soul music through the power of God," he once said. "Not me, but through the power of God and the people. The little people out there are the ones that have kept Solomon Burke alive." Still, the road wasn't without its bumps. One of his earliest hurdles came with the release of "Just Out of Reach" of My Two Empty Arms, a song that, despite Burke's hopes, didn't land as well as expected. "Dreams won't let me be," he said, expressing the frustration of putting everything into his music only to meet silence in return. But Atlantic's Jerry Wexler wasn't ready to give up. He handed Burke a batch of country songs to record, a move that confused Solomon at first. He suspected his manager might be trying to sideline him. The real challenge, though, went deeper than music genres. At the time, Burke was not just an entertainer, he was a spiritual leader, a respected elder in his church. The label rhythm and blues singer didn't sit well with his congregation. In their eyes, that kind of music wasn't appropriate for a man of the cloth. Burke understood their concerns. Being called an R&B artist could jeopardize everything he'd built in his ministry. So he went to the label with a request. Don't call him an R&B singer. They needed something new, something true to who he was. After some discussion, a compromise emerged. Soul singer. The solution couldn't have been more perfect. Calling him a soul singer didn't just appease Solomon Burke's church community, it thrilled them. To them, it wasn't just a genre label, it was a mission. Singing soul meant saving souls, and that aligned beautifully with Burke's role as a spiritual leader. As Burke later explained, "I was singing soul music, not accepting the title of an R&B singer. I was rebelling against the disc jockeys and the record executives who wanted me to be something I wasn't. I kept pressing the word soul music, and that word stuck." It was through this push for authenticity that Solomon Burke earned the title King of Soul. More than just a nickname, it marked the birth of an entire movement. In 1961, that new title didn't just elevate Burke's career, it helped shape an entirely new musical genre. What we now call soul music had found its voice, and Solomon Burke was at the heart of it. But there was something else that made him unforgettable: his presence. Jerry Wexler, one of the sharpest minds at Atlantic Records, was captivated by Burke. He loved his voice, yes. But more than that, he admired Burke's energy, his charisma, his ability to turn a stage into something sacred. For Solomon Burke, a concert wasn't just a show, it was a revival. He'd take the mic, pour every ounce of himself into each note, and before long the crowd would be on their feet, shouting, swaying, even running down the aisles as if they were in church. To Wexler, it was electric. Burke's performances blurred the line between entertainment and worship, and that, more than anything, set him apart. Solomon Burke versus James Brown. Now here's where things get interesting. The not-so-secret rivalry between Solomon Burke, famously crowned the king of rock and soul, and James Brown, the unstoppable godfather of soul. The tension between them wasn't subtle. There was always a quiet, and sometimes not so quiet, competition bubbling beneath the surface. Both were known for their dynamic stage presence, and both wore dramatic capes as part of their signature performances, a clear visual overlap that invited constant comparisons. But the two men were different in more ways than one. James Brown was lean, agile, and electrifying on stage, dropping to his knees, spinning, dancing with wild energy. Solomon Burke, on the other hand, had a much larger frame, which made those acrobatic stunts impossible. Yet Burke had his own kind of stage power. He didn't need to move like Brown to captivate an audience. His voice, his presence, and his command were more than enough. And then came the coronation. Burke was officially dubbed the King of Rock and Soul by a major radio station, a title that wasn't just handed out casually. They held an actual coronation ceremony. Burke performed 5 nights in a row, and every night someone would walk out on stage and ceremoniously place a crown and robe on him. It was theatrical, bold, and unforgettable. The message was clear. Solomon Burke was royalty. James Brown didn't take it well. He was furious. He believed he had earned the crown. After all, his hit, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, was dominating the charts, and his shows were the stuff of legend. In his eyes, that should have sealed the deal. Brown went so far as to call the radio station and complain. He argued that he had sold more records than Burke, gave more energetic performances, and deserved the title more. He wanted that crown, badly, and Solomon Burke made sure his voice was heard. In a candid interview, Burke didn't hold back about his feelings toward James Brown. He claimed that Brown avoided him, both on stage and off, and went as far as to question Brown's international reputation, saying he wasn't as successful in Britain or America as people believed. Then came a biting jab that mixed music with boxing. Burke mocked Brown's support of Sonny Liston, blaming Liston's infamous defeat on the fact that he trained to Brown's song Night Train. With a smirk, Burke added, "Listening to that song was a mistake." He didn't stop there. Burke also criticized the way Brown treated his longtime backup group, the Famous Flames. According to him, Brown had lost interest in them, keeping them around more out of superstition than respect. In Burke's view, the once humble James Brown had become arrogant and hard to work with. He even shared a personal story of disrespect. At one of Brown's shows, Burke had been scheduled to perform 6 songs. But when the time came, Brown only allowed him to sing 1 short number. A clear power move, Burke said, meant to belittle him. In those days, fans often spoke of the 3 Bs of soul, Burke, Brown, and Bland, a nod to Bobby Blue Bland. But Burke wasn't fond of the grouping. In his eyes, there was no room for all 3 on the same tier. "It's not Burke, Brown, and Bland," he insisted. "It's just Burke and Bland, or Bland and Burke." Still, for all the rivalry and pointed criticism, Burke never denied Brown's talent. He acknowledged that James was a phenomenal performer, and by then a fast-rising legend in R&B. People were mesmerized by his stage presence and unmatched energy. But like any major figure, James Brown inspired both admiration and friction. The full truth behind their feud remains a mystery. Was Burke simply being honest? Or was there something deeper behind the tension? We may never know. What's certain is this. The rivalry between Solomon Burke and James Brown wasn't just about ego. It was a battle of identities, legacies, and who would wear the crown in the kingdom of soul. Personal life. Let's take a closer look at Solomon Burke's personal life, a world just as colorful and complicated as his career. "I love people, and I try to express that," he once said, "because you know God is love. And the more love you give, the more love you get back." That philosophy wasn't just something he preached. It defined the way he lived, especially when it came to women. Burke had a natural charisma that made people gravitate toward him. He had a gift for words, smooth, confident, and emotionally charged. Many said he could make a woman feel things she had never felt before. And this wasn't something that developed over time. It started young. At just 14 years old, he became a father for the first time, long before most boys his age had even begun thinking about serious relationships. When he signed with Apollo Records, the label altered his age on paper, claiming he was 19 instead of 15. That small deception meant that some of the women who fell for him never realized they were dating a teenager. But Solomon had such a way with people that age often became irrelevant. One story that captures his charm involves an unexpected car accident. Burke had been hit by a woman named Oella Thompson, and instead of just exchanging apologies and parting ways, she took him home to care for him. No one knows exactly what happened between them, but Burke's magnetism was so strong that he somehow ended up living in her home. That's where fate stepped in again. One day, Solomon came home and met Dolores, Oella's niece. She was unlike anyone he had met before, and she completely stole his heart. The two married and went on to have 7 children together. But even this love story had its twists. Dolores would eventually discover that Solomon had been married once before to a woman named Doris P. Williams. The marriage was short, only 2 months, but it had produced a child, a daughter named Valerie. It was a painful revelation, but Dolores chose to stay. But Dolores would soon discover that love alone wasn't enough to hold their marriage together. Solomon Burke, for all his charm and devotion to family, struggled with fidelity. He had numerous affairs, and his pattern of cheating, paired with an increasing sense of disrespect, eventually pushed Dolores to walk away. After their separation, Burke went on to marry Bernardine, but that marriage too would end in heartbreak. Solomon wasn't someone who went through clean, legal separations. In fact, some of his marriages overlapped. Messy timelines and unresolved divorces later emerged in court documents. His love life was as tangled as it was passionate. In total, Burke was married 4 times and fathered 21 children, 14 daughters, 7 sons. "I don't drink, don't smoke, don't believe in using drugs," he once said. And, I do have 21 children, so I believe in God's love. Believe in God. But here's the surprising twist. Most of his children weren't born from his wives. Many came from other women, lovers, companions, brief encounters, who became part of his complicated and far-reaching family story. And with each child came another layer to Burke's life: joy, legacy, but also emotional turmoil. One woman who had her own story to tell was Betty LaVette, a fellow soul singer who met Burke during their time at Atlantic Records. He invited her to join him on tour, but what happened behind the scenes was anything but professional. According to Betty, the arrangement came with an unspoken rule. She had to sleep with him every night. At first, she went along with it, but over time she began to crave something deeper: real affection, real partnership. The problem was, she already had a boyfriend back home. One night after a show, Betty had her boyfriend secretly sneak into her hotel room. When Solomon knocked on the door, she stayed silent, pretending not to be there. They listened as he walked away down the hall, then burst into laughter. That night, she and her boyfriend stayed together. The next morning, she quietly slipped him out of the room, but Solomon had found out, and he was livid. Worse still, he hadn't paid her for her work on the tour. Instead of settling things, he packed up his entourage and left her behind, alone in the city, broke and stranded. But Betty LaVette wasn't the only woman with a story to tell about Solomon Burke. Over the years, whispers and rumors followed the soul legend. Some of them shared only in hushed tones. According to one such account passed down by a niece, a woman close to Burke once claimed that he had a peculiar fixation. He didn't just enjoy the company of women, he was driven by a desire to leave a legacy. The suggestion was that he liked getting women pregnant, as if fatherhood itself was part of his purpose. For Burke, it wasn't just about romance or fleeting pleasure. It was about building something that would last beyond his lifetime. And he did. By the time of his death, Solomon Burke had been married 4 times and had fathered 21 biological children, 14 daughters and 7 sons. He also had 7 stepchildren, 90 grandchildren, and 19 great-grandchildren. It was a family tree that sprawled far and wide. In a 2006 interview, Burke openly reflected on becoming a father at just 14 years old. "Being a father at age 14 might have been a little early," he admitted, "but I don't regret one moment, 1 second, 1 day, or 1 hour. My only regrets are the loss of my twins and my first son." Those twins, James and David, died in infancy, a heartbreaking chapter in a life marked by joy and sorrow. By 1961, Burke already had what he described as 3 kids on the outside and about 4 at home, including children like Eleanor, Melanie, and Solomon Vincent Jr. In a heartfelt open letter to his children, Burke once wrote, "Your love and your strength, and the love of your mothers, have made me the strongest-minded father in the world. I may not be the best father. Maybe I haven't done everything that I should do, could do, or would do. But by the grace of God and your prayers, we will make it. Every day is a new way." There was no denying his flaws. Burke was candid about the choices he made, especially his serial infidelity. "I was young," he said. "Girls were coming from every angle. I couldn't love them all. But I tried." In time, he came to see the toll it had taken. "I realized money didn't solve problems," he confessed. "Maybe the reason I had problems with my marriages was because I didn't spend enough time with my children or my family. I thought sending money home, buying pretty cars, redoing houses, ordering food by the hundreds of dollars a day would keep my family together. But it didn't. Not being there all the time, being on the road 250 days out of the year, was too much. I was gaining the world and losing my children, and my wife, my love life." Declining health and death. For many years, Solomon Burke battled serious health challenges, most of them tied to his size. By 2006, his weight was estimated to be somewhere between 300 and 400 pounds, a lifelong struggle that only became more difficult with age. The New York Times' Ben Cesario once described him as having grown into Henry VIII-like corpulence, noting that in his later years, Burke had to be wheeled to his throne, both literally and symbolically, during performances. Mobility became a growing concern. Arthritis, coupled with his weight, forced him to rely on a wheelchair full-time. But Burke, ever the showman and preacher, saw even that through a spiritual lens. "God put me in this wheelchair," he said in a 2008 interview, half joking, half serious. "God said, 'You are too fat.'" While some speculated he struggled with an eating disorder, Burke dismissed the idea outright. "It's not an eating disorder," he insisted. "If I had one, I wouldn't be traveling like I do." In typical Solomon fashion, he spoke about his condition with equal parts candor and humor. "It's rough," he admitted in 2006. "I love to eat and I love to cook, as you can see. But my hip has to be replaced and a knee has to be replaced, and I've got to lose 150 pounds before they can do that. That's a lot, but it's not," he laughed. "God knows I've enjoyed every kind of food there is all around the world. It's not like I'm going to miss any of it because I've had it all." Despite his good spirits, Burke's health continued to decline. At the time of his death, he still weighed more than 350 pounds. On October 10, 2010, Solomon Burke passed away suddenly at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. He had just landed on a flight from Washington Dulles International Airport and was scheduled to perform 2 days later with the Dutch band De Dijk. The cause of death was not immediately confirmed. According to his family, Burke died of natural causes, but details later emerged during a 2012 probate court hearing regarding his will. Jane Margolis Vickers, Burke's manager, companion, and caregiver of 16 years, testified that doctors at Reston Hospital had suspected he was suffering from a pulmonary embolism. They had urged him not to travel. Burke, however, chose to leave the hospital against medical advice and boarded the transatlantic flight anyway. No autopsy was performed, but most believe that it was, indeed, a pulmonary embolism that claimed his life. Solomon Burke's net worth, business empire, and the house he called home. At the time of his death in 2010, Solomon Burke's net worth was estimated to be around $39 million, though some believe his true wealth may have been higher due to the many businesses he quietly owned. While his peak earnings came in the 1960s and 1970s during his reign as the king of rock and soul, Burke was never just a musician. He was an entrepreneur with a deep understanding of legacy and self-reliance. Long before it was common for artists to diversify their income, Burke built an empire outside the recording studio. He owned funeral homes in California, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, a nod to his early work in mortuary services. This business became a family affair. Two of his children eventually turned the enterprise into a franchise. In addition, Burke ran a limousine service, serving high-end clients and celebrities with the same elegance he brought to the stage. But perhaps the most unexpected venture was his foray into food. Burke operated a line of fast food products, Soul Dogs and Soul Corn, sold at theaters and stadiums under his own brand. These businesses remained active at least until 2004. The house he lived in reflected his grand, regal persona. Tucked away in the Los Angeles hills, Burke's home was a large, elegant estate filled with vintage furniture, gold-framed portraits, rich velvet drapes, and oversized thrones, symbols of both his spiritual calling and musical title. The home doubled as a sanctuary and workspace, often filled with family, gospel music, and the aroma of Southern food. Like Burke himself, it was a space of warmth, drama, and undeniable presence, a true kingdom for the King of Soul. What surprised you most about Solomon Burke's private world, his wealth, his businesses, or the way he lived? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content like this. Until next time.